Well, hello, all of our real life church friends. Just want to catch you up on what the Lord's been speaking to us in these days. It's an interesting time to live. I can't imagine a time more filled with anxiety, but filled with anticipation of what God is about to do. Hear that from all over the world, the pastors in churches and all over town. They're saying essentially the same thing, that God is stirring their church, and you can't go back to business as usual, but it's time to really hear what God's saying in these days, and to come back together with a new vitality and a new life, and just a great sense of faith and hope that God is up to something. I just refuse to be a victim of China and a victim of coronavirus. Our life is in the hands of God, and
Right.
we are believing that God is in this, no matter how it started or who did what or who's doing what. God's doing something, and that's what I want to know, and that's what I want to do in these days. Follow God, find out what He's doing, and do that. You know, isn't it interesting that before this year even started, God spoke to us as a church and said, next year, see what God can do. See what God can do. And you remember what's on the back of our t-shirts? I'll see the invisible. So we're not looking at what governments do, although that's interesting. And what doctors are saying to us, that is interesting. And it's important to follow good rules of hygiene and health and all that. It is interesting. But far more important to me, what is God doing? I want to see the invisible so I can have the improbable and do the impossible. So what is God doing in these days? So if you followed along on my video podcast, you know that I've been talking about God speaking to us in that way, that change is coming, that out of difficult times, transition comes. And so I want to talk to you about that a bit today. About a week ago or so, something like that, I had this on my mind. I had made the podcast for the day, and I was thinking about transitions and difficulties and all that, and thinking about you and what you're going through in your lives, and just praying and asking God, where are we, and what are we going to do, and what's ahead of us, and what is our church going to be like, and how will we meet, and what should we be doing? So my mind is full of all those kind of questions, and I was awakened early in the morning, as I sometimes do, probably 2:30 in this particular case, and tossed and turned for a bit, got out of bed, and just began to pray. And uppermost on my mind as I'm praying is, God, I need you to talk to me. I need you to tell me what's going on. I need some direction. I need insight. And just kind of praying that way and waiting on the Lord. And as I prayed, I heard God begin to talk to me. And as I do often when I believe God's talking to me, I grab my iPad and just begin to write down what I hear God saying. And I did that morning, a week ago or so. And so I want to share with you today what it was that God talked to me about a week ago. And I believe you'll be excited about our future as I am because of this. So in my prayer time, I said, God, I need you to talk to me. And after listening a little bit, I began to hear God saying this: I have already been talking to you. I've led you into the understanding that transitions come out of a time of trouble, that I use trouble to shake my people out of their sleep and to cause them to awake to the possibilities of new possibilities of life in me. In times of peace and prosperity, your need to hear my voice loses its desperation. But I am now allowing you to hunger and thirst so that I can feed you with new manna and teach you that even as man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, so I am stripping away everything that you've trusted in that's not of me, so that I may teach you a new level of hearing my voice. Today, if you will hear my voice, I will lead you out of the wilderness of your own endeavors and into an abundance that is of my doing and not produced by human effort, but is born out of a closer relationship between you and me. That was exciting to hear. God's speaking to me that he's going to lead us out of where we've been and into some new things that is a deeper relationship with him, and we may be able to hear his voice. And it was really out of that I began to do the video podcast of hearing God, hearing his voice. We need to hear his voice in these days. And I was taken by the fact that God said, I've been talking to you. And I further realized that what God was saying, that the study that I've been doing, which was primarily Exodus and Deuteronomy, I thought I was building a sermon. I thought I was building a teaching series. But God began to show me that it wasn't a teaching series, although I may do that. But the point was that God was trying to get my attention. He was talking to me through those passages, but I just didn't really catch on to that. And so I went back to some of the verses that were especially meaningful, that really caught my attention, and began to reread those verses and ask God, what are you saying to me? Why did you point this verse out? What are you saying? So let me share with you some of those verses. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, God is speaking through Moses to the nation of Israel as they're about to enter into the promised land after 40 years of wilderness wandering. And you know the way the chapter starts. It's a familiar passage probably. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God." And then he goes on to say, you're to listen to his commandments and statutes and do everything he tells you to do. But it was particularly the next verse that really caught my attention, where Moses said to the Israelites, the things that I am showing you are for you, your son, and your grandson, all the days of your life, that your days may be prolonged. And so God began to show me in that passage that he was talking about generational things, that the message of God in this day was to help each generation do what God had designed them to do. And so God was opening my understanding to that. It's not just to build a sermon, but it's a signal from God that God was dealing with us about issues that were important for our future. And so these are generational life lessons that will provide the foundation for the days to come. And then the other passage I had been reading and studying and honestly preparing a sermon out of was Exodus chapter 17. Again, it's a familiar story. The Israelites are fighting the Amalekites, and down in the valley, Joshua is leading the army of God, and up on the mountaintop, Moses is praying and overseeing the battle. And the story says that as long as Moses kept his hands raised, then Israel prevailed in the valley. But when he began to tire and his hands would droop, then the nation of Israel would lose in the valley and the Amalekites would prevail. And so Aaron and Hur, two Israelite men, saw the condition and put a stone behind Moses for him to set on. And it says that the two of them, one on each side, took hold of his hands and raised it in the air, so his hands could stay raised, and the Israelites in the valley could win. Now I've heard that story my whole life. I remember it in Sunday school as a boy, and I've always heard it taught that the lesson here is if you will support leadership, then you'll be successful. And I think that's a good take on the story. But I knew that. That's not news to me. So when I was reading it again, I said, God, I need you to help me understand. What are you showing me here that's different or more than what I've already known? What are you trying to speak to me about? And then God began to talk to me and said to me, what you're seeing is more than just the standard lesson of supporting leadership. What you're seeing is the proper function and placement of each generation. When the older generation is doing what it should do on the hill, overlooking the battle, interceding and overseeing what's happening, when your older generation is doing that, then the younger generation down in the valley is fighting the battle and they're successful. So the older generation is on the hill interceding and overseeing the battle, and the younger generation is down in the heat of the battle. And so again, I'm just saying, okay, Lord, I understand that. So what are you saying to me? And I felt like the Lord said this: it is time for you to come up out of the valley out of the heat of the battle and take on a new role, while allowing the next generation to lead the people into successfully defeating the enemy. It is time to turn the leadership of Real Life Church over to John and Anna Marie. That was clear as a bell to me, and set me back a little bit. I didn't expect to have that kind of clarity of direction, but it clearly was God, and I knew it was God as God spoke to me. And so my next question is, I'm just waiting on the Lord, is, well, then what are Kathy and I to do? And the Lord told me a couple of things. First, he said, rest from the battle. We've been pastoring for more than 40 years here in Las Vegas, 42 or 3 years, something like that. And like any pastorate, you have your times of rejoicing and your times of struggle. And God was saying, it's time for you to come up out of the heat of the battle and turn the leadership of the church over to a younger generation. And you take the position that I've called you to. And if you'll do that, then the church will be successful. And so rest from the battle. And the second thing I feel like God told me was this: trust me, see what I can do. Because I'm saying, what will we do? I don't have a plan, I don't believe that pastors retire. I don't. I'm not looking to, buy a boat and just go fishing the rest of my life or something. Although I told Doug that might not be too bad occasionally. But what are we to do? And I felt like the Lord said, trust me, there is a plan. I have a plan for you. Trust me. Follow the cloud as you've always done, and trust me to open doors for you. And then the Lord said, I gave you this house. Remember, we're in this house we've had for a couple of years, and the Lord said, I gave you this house not just so that you'd have a nice place to live in your latter years, but so you would have a lesson in trusting me. If you may recall, I talked about this a couple of years ago, and we're ready to buy the house, and we're struggling. It was a step of faith to do it, financially. And I felt like God said to me, buy it and watch me work. And so here we are a couple of years later, and our testimony, God has been working. We're doing okay as we get ready for our future. And so buy it and watch me work. And the Lord says, in the coming days, you're going to build on that. You're going to learn to trust me and watch me work. So that's that event from a week ago. When I was done praying, it was a couple of hours, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning at that point, and I looked at the clock and realized it was morning in England. And so the very first thing I did is got on the phone to Colin Cooper and said, Colin, this is what I'm hearing from the Lord, and I need you to be a true friend to me. If this is something that you don't witness to, if it's just a wacky idea, I need you to tell me that. Don't just say, yeah, whatever you think you ought to do, just do that. I need you to confirm or deny. I need you to say it is God or don't do this. I need you to be that kind of friend to me right now. And Colin said to me, David, I believe this is God. For a while now, I've sensed that it's time for you to turn the church to John and Anna Marie, and for you and Kathy to move into a new role. So I absolutely confirm that. And so in talking to Colin, I said to him, I don't know what I'll do. What will we do afterwards? And Colin said this to me, David, don't you ever worry about what you'll be doing. He said, you have a father's heart. There's a father's spirit about you. And there's a calmness that you bring into every situation I've seen you in. He said there's MFI churches all over the world that are going through intense circumstances, and they need a father to step in with some calmness and bring wisdom to their situation. Don't you ever worry about what you'll be doing. There'll be plenty to do. And, it was a nice thing to hear that you're wanted and needed, but that's not a specific job description, but just a sense that we can follow the Lord. God will provide, God will open doors, and there'll be things to do. But above all, I need you to hear, we're not going away. We're not leaving the church. We're not moving. We're not going to be on the road traveling all the time. This is our home. Our church will forever be part of this church. And so we're just looking for the days to come, how God will deal with us and open doors for us. So then the very next thing I did is called John and Anna Marie, and then talk to them about this. And then last night we had a meeting with all the elders by Zoom, so we're all on the internet together and could see one another's face and have a good chat. And the general consensus of the elders is that they're optimistic about the future, believe it's God, and they're supportive of whatever it is that they feel God is speaking to me to do. Excited about our future, to see what God will do as we move ahead. And so in October, the October 18th, we're currently scheduled a Pass the Baton meeting where I will formally pass the leadership of the church to John and Anna Marie. And then we'll see what God has for the rest of us. We're excited about our future and about what God will do in our church, and excited to do that together with you. So that's our news. And you know, the one real joy for me has been partnering with Kathy in this and seeing her excitement and seeing her acknowledgement and belief that in fact this is God's will for us. And so we're moving ahead together. We're in agreement. We're excited about what God is doing for us and to us. And so we want to just go together. And I want to give Kathy a chance to talk to you and let you hear what she believes God's saying.
Well, I am excited, and I'm, I'm so appreciative that God has been talking to not just Pastor Dave, but to many people. I believe He's talking to many of you. Some have emailed us and let us know what God is saying to you. Even Todd's message last Sunday on unity was timely for us. And a lot of things that have been said even prior to that, you know, you don't make sense of things that God is saying until it makes sense, until He really shows you this is what this is about. And so that's how this is turning into our understanding of what God is saying. And it really, I believe, coincides with what God is saying to many, many other people. We cannot go back to the way things were. We must press forward.
Right.
And so this is how God is saying to us at Real Life Church, this is how we press forward. And I'm especially excited about John and Anna Marie taking the church forward as we hand off to them the responsibilities of leading the church. Some people have said to us, well, you know, John and Anna Marie are so different from you. Yes, we're very aware of that, and that's why we're excited. We need something so very different from Pastor Dave and me. Now, you who know us know that we're not perfect people, and you have given us grace as you have walked with us and seen our deficiencies and our faults and whatever lack that we have, and you have walked with us and been a strength to us and covered us and strengthened us. So we want to do that same thing with John and Anna Marie. We know they're not perfect people, and you're not perfect people. Nobody's perfect. If Jesus were to come, He would be the perfect one to lead the church forward. He is leading the church forward, and we're all following Him. And we are the under shepherds that He has placed here at Real Life Church. So we're excited about what John and Anna Marie will bring, and we're going to be following them as they take over the senior leadership of the church. And we look forward to the days to come and all that God is going to do. And I want to say this too, you guys have a part. You who are viewing this video have a part. As Todd talked about last Sunday, unity is not uniformity, but we all need to be in agreement that God is carrying us forward, that we are hearing the voice of the Lord. It might not look the way I want it to be. Trust me, this isn't the way I envisioned things to transition. Not at all the way I envisioned it. And I won't talk about the way I had envisioned it, because that's not what's happening. But I am glad that God is on the throne. I am not God, and we're following Him. He has a perfect way for us. And if we will not fly apart, but stay on track of what God is saying to us, together we're going to go forward in His plan for us, just like the children of Israel did. Everybody in their proper place, following the Lord. My mother-in-law used to say, follow the ark, wherever it goes, follow the ark. That was a little bit later when the ark came on the scene, but that's the presence of God, the ark of the covenant. And we want to go wherever the presence of the Lord is leading us. We cannot set our own path or do what we choose to do. We've never done that in our lives. I should say, when we have done that in our lives, we've messed it up and we've had to get back on track. So today we're saying we're staying on track and we're going the way God wants us to go and not blazing a path of our own. So we love you and we want to walk hand in hand with you in the future, just like we're doing now as best we can. And we need you to play your part in going forward with whatever God has for us in the church at Real Life Church.
You know, one of the beautiful things about being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus, is that you learn to hunger for His presence in your life. His presence is what makes the difference. And when we think about the future of our church, and talk about you can't go back to what we used to be, you have a world that's gone crazy right now, and you don't really know when all that will end. And what I know is the church can't just be another voice of all the groups in the community that are trying to help people. There has to be something in the church that you can get nowhere else. And that something is the presence of God, the life of God that's in the Word of God and the Spirit of God and the people of God. There has to be something there that people can reach for and come to that they can't get from the government and they can't get from the hospital and they can't get from counselors. They can only get it by being in the presence of God. And I believe that's the journey before us, as God would cause us to be like a city on a hill, that the light of God is risen upon us. And we can say to the community, come experience the presence of God with us. Find healing, find strength, find restoration in a way that you can't find nowhere else. That's ahead of us, my friends. And let's just hang in there and see what God can do together, shall we? That's the theme that God has given us for this year. Let's see what God can do. And I'm excited to continue this journey together with you. Let's go on in the days ahead and see what God can do. God bless you, my friends. We love you.
We love you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.